She walked into a quiet Florida diner, just looking for dinner. 10 minutes later, 3 men were on the floor, one was screaming, and the cops had their guns drawn. But this wasn't just self-defense, because the woman covered in gumbo was a U.S. Naval Special Operative on a classified mission, and what she did next turned a town's worst criminals into unexpected heroes. You won't believe how it ends. This is Real Cops USA. In a quiet fishing town along the Florida Gulf Coast, where shrimp trawlers outnumber speedboats and the humid air smells of salt and diesel, the monsoon had just rolled past. Thick moss clung to wooden docks, and rows of palm trees swayed gently under a sun that baked the asphalt until it shimmered. People here knew each other's names, their routines, their secrets, but they weren't ready for the storm that would come, not from the skies, but from a woman. Officer Ava Ramirez had been deployed to Florida's Gulf Command on what was officially termed a Joint Coastal Intelligence Exchange program with Homeland Security. But her real orders came from deeper channels. Ava, 29, was one of the most skilled infiltration operatives in the U.S. Naval Special Warfare Group. Former SEAL, now Black Ops task leader for an ongoing operation dubbed Trident. Her cover? A researcher studying red tide blooms in local fisheries. Her real mission? To trace a suspected smuggling route for illegal arms funneled through minor ports along the Gulf and identify ties to a rising cartel cell with rumored paramilitary backing. Locals knew her only as Dr. Ava, the quiet marine biologist with a tan backpack and a calm smile. She wore loose clothes that blended in with the dusty fishermen and sunburned dock hands. Her dark hair was always tied back in a braid, her eyes alert behind round sunglasses. She spoke with a hint of Latin twang, just enough to pass for a Texan transplant. But behind those soft manners was a mind trained to kill, an instinct honed for survival. 10 days into her mission, she had mapped out every shift in port traffic, every suspicious vessel, every local patrol pattern. She tracked which trawlers lingered too long offshore, which warehouses never opened their doors, and who spoke too little. She was nearly ready to move on her target. All she needed was one more piece of the puzzle. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the docks, Ava found herself hungry. Tired of protein bars and prepped meals, she decided to dine at a roadside diner, Tito's Catch, a rickety place by the marina frequented only by locals. It smelled of fried catfish, grease, and spice. The walls were lined with faded Polaroids of fishermen with their catches, and a dusty American flag hung above the counter. She picked a booth in the back, where she could face the room and watch every movement. The waitress, an older black woman with kind eyes, brought her a shrimp po' boy with coleslaw. Ava nodded in thanks, ate slowly, savoring the food and the peace. But peace, for her, was always the last breath before war. A group of local young men entered, loud and rowdy, reeking of beer and bravado. They were the self-declared kings of the marina, known troublemakers, loosely connected to the cartel Ava was investigating. One of them, the ringleader, walked with the swagger of someone who'd never been held accountable. His name was Ray Decker, tan, lean, with a face too smug for his own good and knuckles too scarred to be clean. "Look at that one," Ray whispered to his boys, nodding toward Ava. "Ain't seen her before. That skin, that accent, must be some foreign grad student. All alone. Probably lonely too." The others laughed. Ava didn't react. She'd been trained to endure far worse, in far darker places. Words were just noise. They had no power unless she gave them meaning. But Ray took her silence as submission. He swaggered toward her booth, slid into the opposite seat without asking, and smiled with cheap cologne leaking from every pore. "Hey, gorgeous. You always eat alone. Mind if I keep you company?" Ava stopped mid-bite and looked up slowly. Her eyes met his. There was no warmth in them, just a calm, black stillness, a cold mirror that showed him exactly who he was. Ray flinched for a split second, but pride doesn't back down in front of friends. "Oh, come on," he laughed. "Don't be shy. We can show you around, protect you. Girls like you shouldn't be out alone at night." He reached out as if to touch her hair. Her hand moved faster than he could see. She caught his wrist midair and twisted. Crack! Ray screamed, collapsing onto the table as his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. The diner fell into stunned silence. His buddies stood up, shocked. The waitress dropped her tray. Everyone froze. "Back off," Ava said softly, her voice like a blade. "You don't want to test what happens next." But the gang didn't listen. Ray's pride had been shattered. He screamed, "You crazy, but get her!" The other three men rushed her like wild dogs. But Ava didn't move from her booth. She stood up slowly, like a shadow rising behind them. The first man reached for her arm. He never made it. She pivoted and drove her elbow into his jaw. He collapsed like a sack of bricks. The second tried to grab her from behind. She dropped low, swept his legs, and drove her knee into his chest as he hit the ground. The third man hesitated, then lunged. She ducked, stepped in, and drove her palm into his throat. 10 seconds. 3 men on the floor, groaning or unconscious. Ray, with his shattered wrist, stared at her in horror. You don't know who I am?" She leaned over the table, face to face with him. "I know exactly what you are," she whispered, "but you don't know what I am." Just as he was about to respond, he grabbed a bowl of gumbo from the next table and threw it in her face. Hot, thick stew splashed across her hair, her shirt, her skin. The diner gasped. Ray laughed manically. "Look at you now, you freaking mutt! Look at you!" But Ava didn't flinch. She stood there dripping gumbo, eyes closed. And then she opened them. They were no longer human. They were a predator's eyes, and Ray's soul froze in terror. She walked toward him, slowly, deliberately. Each step sounded like a funeral drum. "Stop," Ray whimpered. "Don't come any closer." But she did. She grabbed him by the collar, kneed him in the gut, and pinned his twisted arm behind his back. His scream echoed into the night. "You used words to shame a woman. You used your hands to violate. And you used food, this culture's gift, to humiliate." She pressed her mouth to his ear. "You'll carry the price of all 3 sins." Then came the sound of police sirens outside. Someone had called the cops. The door burst open, and 2 local deputies entered, weapons drawn. What they saw was surreal. 3 men unconscious, 1 groaning, a woman dripping gumbo standing over them like a storm made flesh. Ava slowly reached into her soaked satchel and pulled out her military ID in a waterproof pouch. "Lieutenant Ava Ramirez, Naval Special Warfare Command. I acted in self-defense. These men assaulted me. I request their arrest." The deputies didn't know what hit them, and the storm had only just begun. The Florida Sheriff's Station in Gulf Point was used to noise. Bar fights, drug calls, missing tourists. But the dispatcher's voice over the radio that night carried a tone no one missed. Tense, confused. "Units respond to Tito's catch. Possible assault in progress. Female officer involved. Multiple injured suspects on scene. Requesting supervisor response." Sheriff Lucas Maddox, a tall man with storm gray eyes and a voice like worn leather, paused his evening coffee. He'd done 18 years in the Texas Rangers before taking the Florida sheriff job as a quiet retirement post. But this didn't sound quiet. He grabbed his Stetson, his sidearm, and drove straight into the unfolding storm. By the time he arrived, red and blue lights lit up the marina like a crime scene from a war zone. A crowd had gathered. Inside the diner, it looked like a barroom brawl, except the tables were untouched, the damage strangely surgical. 3 young men groaned on the floor. One had his wrist in a sick angle. Another coughed blood. And in the center of it all, standing completely still, with gumbo dripping down her face in uniform, was a woman. Maddox stepped through the doorway. His boots met silence. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez stood at attention, calm and expressionless, holding out her Navy ID like a soldier reporting after battle. "Lieutenant Ramirez," he said, reading the card carefully. "Tell me what happened." She answered like filing a mission report. "Entered diner at 19:15 hours, engaged in a solo meal. Subjects initiated unsolicited verbal contact. Ignored. Subject Ray Decker escalated to physical contact. I issued verbal warning. Warning ignored. Minimal force applied to neutralize threat. Group aggression followed. Tactical self-defense engaged. Incident concluded at 19:26 hours. No civilian harm. I request official documentation of events and recommend arrest under local statutes for aggravated assault, sexual harassment, and attempted battery. She delivered every word with precision, no emotion, no hesitation. Sheriff Maddox wasn't just hearing her words. He was watching her body language. Calm, controlled, efficient. He glanced at the suspects. Injuries were real but calculated. No wild brawling here. These were targeted strikes to subdue, not punish. Where'd you learn to fight like that, Lieutenant? Naval Special Warfare, Team 7. That hit like a hammer. Maddox exhaled. Damn. He nodded once and turned to the deputies. Cuff the boys. Charge them as requested. Call EMS, but let them sit in that pain a while. As the groaning suspects were dragged to cruisers, he motioned for Ava to follow him back to the station. She did, without a word. Inside, the sheriff's office smelled of cedar and aged coffee. Maddox sat behind his desk and reviewed the preliminary statements. Ava stood in front of him, her eyes never wavering. I've seen plenty of fights, Lieutenant. This wasn't one. This was discipline. I also know the Decker crew. They've been teetering on cartel recruitment. You might have just saved us months of surveillance. I wasn't here to save anyone, she said. Just here for the mission. He raised an eyebrow. And what mission is that? She paused. I can't tell you that, Sheriff. Maddox leaned back. Let me guess. Black File? Special Operations? She gave no answer. You Navy folks love your shadows. He stood and walked over to the window, gazing at the dark marina. The waves outside slapped gently against the docks, as if mocking the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. They'll serve time, he said. The Deckers. Not their first rodeo, but this time, with a military officer involved, they'll get hard time. Ava didn't move. Don't send them to prison, she said. He turned. Excuse me? Prison won't change them. Just make them meaner, smarter criminals. I don't want punishment, Sheriff. I want reform. That word hit harder than any punch. Reform, he repeated. From you. Her voice lowered. Yes, I can break them, rebuild them. Not with lectures, not with therapy, but with sweat, discipline, service. I want to train them, physically, mentally. I want to burn away the rot. Maddox blinked. You want me to hand over 4 civilian suspects to a black ops soldier for reform training? It's a choice. Either that or they do time. I'm not above the law, Sheriff, but I can offer a second path. Under your supervision, your terms. You watch them, I shape them. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the old AC unit. Maddox stared into her eyes. There was no hate in them, no vengeance. Just something more dangerous. Purpose. You realize this is crazy, he said finally. She didn't flinch. Good, she said. It means it might work. Later that night, 4 bruised and handcuffed men were lined up in the holding cell, wondering what fresh hell awaited them. Maddox entered the room with Ava behind him. Ray Decker sneered despite his splinted wrist. What now? Interrogation? Or we going straight to prison? The sheriff ignored him. You have 2 options, Maddox said. Option 1, you go to trial, face the charges. Aggravated assault, battery, harassment. You'll be processed, convicted, and your records will follow you forever. Your lives, as you know them, are done. The room fell silent. Option 2, he continued. You accept a month of rehabilitation, supervised by my office, led by this officer here. She will push you harder than boot camp. There will be no comforts, no shortcuts. But if you finish, we drop the charges, clean slate. They looked at each other, confused, suspicious. Ray snorted. You serious? What's she gonna do? Yell us into behaving? No, Ava said, stepping forward. I'm going to break you down, make you clean what you've trashed, lift what you've tried to destroy, sweat for every scar you've caused. This isn't mercy, this is debt. You ruined my meal, tried to ruin my honor. You'll repay it with your blood, your breath, and your time. They stared at her like she was mad, and maybe she was. Ray started to laugh, then stopped. Her eyes were locked onto his. There was no malice, just fire. It was the first time in his life a woman scared him. Maddox stepped in. Decide now, jail or training. Ray looked at the floor. His broken wrist throbbed. His pride was already shattered. But behind the pain, something shifted. A small, distant thought. What if? He looked up. I'll take the training, he muttered. One by one, the others followed. Good, Ava said. We start at sunrise. Outside the station, the Gulf wind howled. Ava stood quietly, eyes fixed on the sea. The real mission, the weapons shipment, was still out there, beyond the tide. But this was personal now. She had come to stop criminals. Now, she was going to forge men, one scar at a time. By dawn, the Gulf Coast still shimmered with moonlight. At the back of the sheriff's station, 4 rough-looking men stood in silence, waiting for orders. Their expressions equal parts defiance and doubt. They wore state-issued boots and oversized work shirts. Their bodies were sore, their pride already bruised. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez stood before them, arms crossed, braid damp with ocean mist, boots planted like a tree that had never moved in a storm. No warm-up, she said. Your first mission is here. She pointed to a stagnant canal behind the marina, rank, black, and choked with garbage. Plastic bags, broken nets, dead fish, and beer bottles bobbed in the water. Clear it, she said, with your hands, no gloves, no gear. This is your trash. You swim in it, you clean it. The men exchanged horrified glances. With our hand? One stammered. Lady, that's a sewer. You had no problem dragging someone through filth last night, Ava snapped. This is payback for every inch of this town you poisoned. Move. They hesitated. She stared. They moved. The water clung to them like oil. The smell curled their stomachs. Every step was a gamble. What dead thing might their feet hit next? But still, they dragged, lifted, and heaved mountains of rot from the canal for hours until their hands bled. By noon, they sat on the bank, coated in black muck, silent and broken. But the water flowed a little clearer now, the fish fewer but visible. And as the sunlight glinted on the canal, they saw something else reflected back. Effort, consequence, maybe just maybe change. That was day 1. Over the next week, Ava shattered them. Mornings were physical hell, pulling abandoned boats to shore, hauling nets full of rocks, running barefoot across beaches that scorched their feet. You quit, she said once, and I'll let you rot in jail instead. But if you keep going, maybe you'll rot into something better. Afternoons were service. They repainted crumbling walls at the town's public school, repaired broken shrimp traps, and helped elderly fishermen untangle their docks before storms. No one applauded, but no one chased them away either. It was during one of those long afternoons that something changed. An old man, skin like dried bark, limped up to Ray Decker and placed a small basket of oranges in his hands. For you, the man said. My boat don't wobble no more. Thanks. Ray stared at the fruit like it was treasure. He'd stolen cash, cigarettes, even people's peace, but never earned anything. That night, over a fire they built with their hands, the crew roasted fish given by a local family. No seasoning, no sauce, just salt, smoke, and pride. They said little, but the silence wasn't hollow anymore. At sunset, Ava gave them notebooks. Write what you did today, she said, what you felt. Some couldn't spell, some barely wrote. Ava sat beside them and helped, word by word, not as a trainer, as someone who'd bled too. I'm not here to make you soldiers, she said once. I'm here to make sure you can look in a mirror again and not flinch. But change doesn't come without backlash. On day 11, Ray snapped. The heat, the sweat, the guilt, it all exploded. He slammed down his notebook and stood up. What's the point of all this? He yelled. We'll never be good enough. We're trash. You think picking up garbage changes who we are? The others tensed. Ava stood slowly. She didn't yell back. She walked to a wooden boat the sheriff had deemed too far gone. Heavy, waterlogged, dead weight. She grabbed the front rope, pulled, again, until the boat moved. Trash? She whispered. This boat was trash too. You see it now, don't you? Ray watched, breathless. You think this is torture, she said, but it's resurrection. Your problem isn't the mud on your skin. It's the filth in your spirit you refuse to face. You keep saying you're broken, like that excuses you from trying to heal. Guess what? So am I. She pulled again. The boat groaned. The wood cracked, but it moved. You want a reason? Fine. This town deserves to be better than the shadow you cast on it. And so do you. But I won't give that to you. You'll take it with your own damn hands. Ray sat down, quietly. The others followed. Something inside them cracked that night, and something else took root. By week 3, they'd stopped complaining. They jogged together, ate together, lifted each other up. Ray, once the bully, caught another teammate when he slipped hauling nets and didn't laugh. He just helped him stand. Ava changed too. She stopped barking orders, started asking them to lead. They planned routes to help remote villages, learned how to repair radio equipment, delivered food to shut-ins. One day she asked them to choose their own mission. Find something this town needs and fix it. They didn't argue. They just did it. A week later, a storm rolled in fast off the Gulf. Fierce, brutal. The marina turned to chaos as winds howled and waves lashed the docks. A tourist boat capsized offshore, dragging a family into the cold, dark water. The official rescue teams were miles away. Ava was already suiting up when she heard someone shout behind her. "Wait!" It was Ray and the others. "We're coming with you." She looked at them. They were shaking, but they didn't back down. Together, the 5 of them grabbed an old wooden rescue boat, tied themselves in with harnesses, and rode straight into the teeth of the storm. The water was war. People clung to wreckage, screaming. A child was caught under debris, too far for the boat. Without a word, Ray dove in. He didn't hesitate. He fought the current, reached her, and shielded her with his body when a wave smashed a wooden beam into his back. Blood poured down his shoulder. He didn't let go. Ava jumped in after him, rope in hand. They pulled both aboard minutes later. The girl coughed, breathed. Ray passed out with a smile. The Coast Guard arrived an hour later, but the town already knew what had happened. Ray and the others had risked everything. Not for glory, not for redemption, but because it was right. That night, the sheriff held a ceremony under the stars. These men, he said, once brought shame to this town, but today they saved it. They are no longer inmates. They are heroes. The crowd cheered. Ray didn't speak. He just cried. The next morning, Ava met them on the beach. No uniforms, no orders, just silence. "I'm leaving today," she said. "Mission's over." They looked down, unsure what to say. "I'm not your captain anymore," she said. "What you do next is yours to choose." Ray looked up, eyes red but strong. "We started trash," he said, "but now we want to protect what we nearly destroyed." They formed a group, the Gulf Watch. They cleaned the beaches, patrolled the canals, taught kids how to swim, how to fish, how to stay safe. Ray's scar never healed right, but he wore it like a badge. And Ava? She left without fanfare. Just a canvas bag and her badge, disappearing like the tide she had once come in on. But her echo stayed behind, in clean canals, in stronger men, in a town reborn. Somewhere far out in the Atlantic, on a Navy sub stalking arms traffickers, Lieutenant Ava Ramirez stared at a sonar screen. Her voice rang clear in the silence. "Target in range, ready to engage." But as she waited, she heard a familiar voice crackle through the open channels. A fishing boat near Gulf Point, joking about the weather. Ray's voice, alive, proud. She smiled. It wasn't on any medal, but it was the most important victory she'd ever earned. The storm had passed, but her legacy, it would echo forever. She came in like a shadow and left without a trace. No medals, no headlines, just a town forever changed. 4 lost men, reborn through sweat, scars, and the storm. And somewhere out there, beneath the waves, she's still watching, still fighting. Because for some heroes, duty never ends. This was more than justice. This was redemption. And this was Real Cops USA. Subscribe now and don't miss the next untold story.